On a spring afternoon in 2016, in a quiet residential neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia, the sound of gunfire shattered the calm. A neighbor dialed 911. When officers arrived at the home on April 9th, they found the front door standing open. In the front yard, 70-year-old Barney Lamar Sims lay motionless, shot twice in the back. The position of his body suggested he had been running, trying to escape whoever had pulled the trigger. Inside the house, investigators found signs of a robbery. A television missing, a wallet gone, and the victim's 2006 Lexus nowhere in sight. But this was no ordinary burglary. Barney Sims was a respected civil rights activist, a retired executive from the Atlanta Housing Authority, and a man who had dedicated his later years to mentoring young people and supporting victims' rights through his work with Atlanta Victims Assistance. Those who knew him remembered his distinctive mustache, his warmth, and the way he opened his home and his time to those who needed guidance. Now, someone had taken his life in broad daylight. The question facing investigators was simple but urgent. Who would want to kill a man known for his generosity and dedication to his community? Before we go deeper, subscribe if you love true crime documentaries and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Detectives from the Atlanta Police Department began processing the scene with methodical precision. They recovered 2 spent 9mm shell casings from the front yard, the brass glinting in the afternoon sun. Forensic technicians dusted the casings for fingerprints, hoping for a direct link to the shooter. None were found. The killer had either worn gloves or handled the ammunition carefully. Early theories began to form. Barney had served on the city's license review board, a role that sometimes resulted in businesses being shuttered or fined. Had one of those decisions created an enemy desperate enough to commit murder? Investigators pulled records of contentious hearings, interviewed business owners who had clashed with the board, and cross-referenced known associates. But the theory felt incomplete. The crime scene suggested something more immediate, more personal. Meanwhile, a patrol unit located Barney's stolen Lexus several miles away, parked at an apartment complex in a different part of the city. Inside the car, detectives found a single item that did not belong to the victim: a Chicago Bulls baseball cap. It was a small clue, but in homicide investigations, small clues often unravel entire cases. The hat was bagged and sent to the crime lab. At the same apartment complex, a maintenance worker discovered Barney's wallet. It had been discarded near a dumpster, but curiously his driver's license was still inside. Whoever had taken it had not been interested in using his identity. Both the wallet and the cap became central pieces of evidence. The breakthrough came when detectives obtained permission from Barney's family to unlock his cell phone using his thumbprint. Digital forensics had become an essential tool in modern homicide investigations, and Barney's phone held a detailed record of his final hours. Call logs revealed that he had received a phone call at 1:24 p.m. on the day of his death, roughly 2 hours before the gunshots were heard. Investigators traced the number and called it back. The person who answered provided a fake address and hung up. Further checks revealed it was a burner phone, a disposable device purchased with cash and impossible to trace to a registered owner. The use of a burner phone suggested premeditation. Someone had contacted Barney, arranged a meeting, and taken steps to avoid being identified. But who? Financial records provided the next lead. Barney had made 2 transactions that day. The first was at a local grocery store at 11:00 a.m., a routine stop for food and household items. The second transaction occurred at 2:30 p.m. at a Waffle House restaurant in East Point, a suburb of Atlanta. Detectives obtained surveillance footage from the Waffle House. The grainy video showed Barney sitting in a booth across from a young man. The two appeared to be talking, eating together. Barney's family members viewed the footage and confirmed they did not recognize the young man. His identity was a mystery, but his presence was undeniable. He had been with Barney less than an hour before the murder. The Atlanta Police Department made a calculated decision. They uploaded the surveillance image to social media, asking the public for help identifying the young man seen with Barney. Tips flooded in within hours. Multiple callers identified the person as 17-year-old Eric Banks, a teenager with a criminal history that included prior weapons charges. Investigators pulled Banks's juvenile records and discovered he had previously been involved in a shooting incident where a 9mm firearm was used. The caliber matched the shell casings recovered from Barney's front yard. Detectives also combed through Banks's social media profiles. Among the photos posted in the weeks before the murder were several images of Banks wearing a Chicago Bulls baseball cap. It was the same style of cap found in Barney's stolen Lexus. The pieces were aligning, but detectives needed more than circumstantial connections. They needed direct evidence. Officers located Banks's father and conducted an interview. The father confirmed that his son was the young man seen in the Waffle House surveillance footage. He also revealed that Banks had been staying with his aunt in recent weeks. While detectives were at the father's home, Banks called unexpectedly. Following instructions from the officers, the father told his son that police wanted to speak with him. Banks did not hang up, but he also did not agree to come in. The call ended, and his location remained unknown. Detectives obtained a search warrant for the aunt's home where Banks had been staying. In the bedroom he used, they found 2 9mm ammunition magazines. The magazines were loaded, but no firearm was recovered. Banks had either hidden the gun or disposed of it. Meanwhile, investigators interviewed Banks's aunt, who provided crucial background information. She confirmed that Banks had met Barney Sims several days before the murder. The introduction had occurred through a group of young people whom Barney mentored. Banks had expressed interest in joining the mentorship program. He wanted guidance, he said, and Barney had welcomed him. This detail complicated the narrative. If Banks had sought out Barney's mentorship, what had gone wrong? 5 days after the murder, Banks's mother contacted the police. Her son, she said, was ready to turn himself in. He was scared, she explained, but willing to face questioning. Detectives arranged for Banks to be brought to the station. The interview room was small, windowless, equipped with a recording system that captured every word. Banks sat across from 2 seasoned homicide detectives. At first, he denied any involvement in Barney's death. He claimed he had been at the Waffle House with Barney, yes, but had left after the meal. He insisted he had not gone to Barney's home. He knew nothing about the shooting. Then the detectives presented the evidence. The Chicago Bulls cap found in the Lexus, the social media photos showing Banks wearing an identical cap, the 9mm shell casings, the timing of the burner phone call, the financial records showing Barney's last transaction at the Waffle House, followed by his murder less than an hour later. Faced with the accumulating evidence, Banks changed his story. He admitted he had shot Barney, but claimed it was in self-defense. According to Banks, Barney had made unwanted sexual advances, both verbal and physical. Banks said he felt threatened and had no choice but to defend himself. He claimed that after leaving the Waffle House, Barney drove him to his home. While they were sitting on a lawn bench outside, Barney began touching him inappropriately. Banks said he pulled out his gun and fired. The self-defense claim presented a legal complication, but the physical evidence contradicted Banks's narrative. Barney had been shot twice in the back. The trajectory of the bullets, the positioning of his body in the yard, and the lack of any defensive wounds on Banks all pointed to a different sequence of events. Barney had been running away when he was shot. He had not been the aggressor. He had been fleeing for his life. On April 16, 2016, 7 days after the murder, Eric Banks was formally arrested and charged with murder, aggravated assault, and armed robbery. The case drew significant attention in Atlanta, not only because of the senseless loss of a respected community figure, but also because it raised troubling questions about trust and betrayal. Barney had opened his time and his heart to a young man who needed mentorship. That generosity had cost him his life. During the legal proceedings, Banks repeated his claims of self-defense, but prosecutors dismantled the argument piece by piece. The forensic evidence was irrefutable. Ballistics confirmed the bullets came from a 9mm weapon. The shell casings matched the type of ammunition Banks had been known to possess. The Chicago Bulls cap contained DNA consistent with Banks's profile. The surveillance footage from the Waffle House established a clear timeline. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, Banks accepted a plea deal. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, avoiding a life sentence but ensuring he would spend decades behind bars. The case left Barney's family and the Atlanta community grappling with grief and anger. Barney Sims had spent his retirement years trying to lift up young people to offer them opportunities and guidance. His work with Atlanta Victims Assistance had helped countless individuals navigate the aftermath of crime. Now, his own death had become a case study in the dangers of misplaced trust. Hundreds of miles northeast in the rolling hills of Virginia, another tragedy was unfolding. On the morning of October 8, 2022, a man named Jacob Piercy woke to a distressing sound. Caitlin Elizabeth Lyon Montgomery's 4-year-old daughter, Milani, was crying. The child said something was wrong with her mother. Jacob rushed to Caitlin's bedroom. The lights were on, the covers pulled back, and Caitlin lay on the bed, unresponsive. He called 911 immediately and began performing CPR, compressing her chest, trying to force air into her lungs. When deputies from the Bedford County Sheriff's Office arrived, they found Caitlin on the floor. She was exhibiting agonal breathing, a gasping, irregular pattern often seen in patients suffering cardiac arrest or severe trauma. Paramedics transported her to Central Lynchburg General Hospital, but despite resuscitation efforts, she was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. She was 28 years old. Physicians conducting the initial examination noted troubling findings. There were linear markings on Caitlin's neck and throat, consistent with strangulation. Petechial hemorrhaging was visible on her face and in her eyes, small burst blood vessels that indicated oxygen deprivation. This was not a natural death. It was homicide. Investigators returned to the home and conducted a thorough search of Caitlin's bedroom. Wrapped inside a blanket on the bed, they found phone charging cords. When forensic technicians compared the width and pattern of the cords to the markings on Caitlin's neck, they matched. The cords had been used as a ligature, tightened around her throat until she lost consciousness and eventually stopped breathing. Detectives began interviewing those closest to Caitlin. Jacob Piercy, the man who had called 911, provided a statement. He said he and Caitlin shared the home, though their relationship was complicated. He had no knowledge of anyone who would want to harm her. But as investigators dug deeper, another name emerged: Trenton Fry, Caitlin's ex-boyfriend. When detectives contacted Fry by phone, he immediately lied. He claimed he had not been in Virginia recently and had no connection to Caitlin's death. His denial raised immediate suspicion. Why would he lie if he had nothing to hide? Investigators obtained phone records and began tracing Fry's movements. The records told a different story. Fry's phone had pinged off cell towers near Lynchburg on the night before Caitlin's death. He had been in Virginia, despite his claims to the contrary. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station captured Fry's vehicle in the area around the time of the murder. Detectives also spoke with Caitlin's friends and family, who revealed that Fry had a history of controlling and violent behavior. Caitlin had ended the relationship months earlier, but Fry had struggled to accept the breakup. He had sent her numerous text messages, some pleading, some threatening. She had blocked his number multiple times, but he continued to find ways to contact her. On the night of October 7th, reports differ on exactly how Fry gained entry to Caitlin's home. Some witnesses claimed he may have had a key from when they were together. Others believed he forced his way inside. What is certain is that at some point during the early morning hours of October 8th, Trenton Fry was inside Caitlin's bedroom. What followed was a brutal act of violence. Forensic analysis suggested Caitlin had been asleep when the attack began. There were no signs of a prolonged struggle in other parts of the home. The attack had been localized to her bedroom. Fry had wrapped the charging cords around her neck and pulled them tight. Caitlin had fought back, her hands clawing at the ligature, but Fry was stronger. Within minutes, she lost consciousness. He did not stop. He held the cords in place until her breathing ceased. Detectives located Trenton Fry several days after the murder. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During interrogations, he offered conflicting accounts. At times, he claimed he had not been in Virginia at all. At other times, he admitted to being at Caitlin's home but said they had simply talked. He denied harming her, but the evidence was overwhelming. The phone records placed him at the scene. The surveillance footage showed his vehicle. Forensic analysis of the charging cords revealed his DNA mixed with Caitlin's. Fibers from his clothing were found on the blanket that had concealed the cords. The case went to trial, and prosecutors presented a meticulous timeline. They demonstrated that Fry had driven from his home to Lynchburg with the intention of confronting Caitlin. They argued that his inability to accept the end of their relationship had culminated in lethal violence. Defense attorneys attempted to introduce alternative theories, suggesting that Jacob Piercy or another party could have been responsible. But the forensic evidence left no ambiguity. Trenton Fry was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Caitlin's daughter, Milani, was left without a mother. Her family spoke at the sentencing hearing, describing Caitlin as a devoted mother who loved music, dancing, and spending time with her child. They said her death had shattered their lives and robbed Milani of the chance to grow up with her mother's love and guidance. Across the Atlantic Ocean, in the historic city of Chester, England, another case was unfolding, one that would reveal the devastating consequences of untreated mental illness. Will Bush was a young man in his 20s, known for his kindness and his close relationships with family and friends. On the morning of October 22, 2023, Will was at home in Chester when his friend Dylan Thomas arrived unexpectedly. Dylan had been staying with his grandmother nearby and had told her he was going to visit Will. He said he would be back in 10 minutes. He told her not to worry, but Dylan had brought 2 knives with him, concealed in his clothing. The friendship between Will and Dylan had been strained in recent months. Dylan had been exhibiting erratic behavior, making disturbing statements, and showing signs of severe mental disturbance. On one occasion, he had told Will that he wondered what it would be like to kill him. Will had dismissed the comment as a dark joke, but in hindsight, it had been a warning. When Dylan entered Will's home that morning, he did not hesitate. He began stabbing Will with the 2 knives he had brought. The attack was ferocious and relentless. Will tried to defend himself, but the onslaught was too sudden and too violent. He attempted to escape, running from his bedroom down the stairs. Blood spattered the walls and carpet. In the kitchen, Will made a final, desperate attempt to flee through a sliding door that led to the patio. He managed to get outside, but the blood loss was catastrophic. He collapsed on the porch and died. Passers-by on the street heard the screams and called the police. When officers arrived, they found Will's body on the patio, surrounded by a scene of unimaginable violence. Inside the home, they traced the path of the attack from the bedroom, down the stairs, through the kitchen, and onto the patio. It was clear that Will had fought for his life, trying to escape, but Dylan had pursued him relentlessly. Dylan Thomas returned to his grandmother's home and told her what he had done. He claimed it had been self-defense. The grandmother, horrified, went to Will's home to try to help, but it was too late. At 11:32 a.m., Dylan called emergency services using his grandmother's phone. He told the operator he needed an ambulance. When asked if the patient was awake, Dylan replied that his friend was dead. Paramedics arrived at the scene at 11:36 a.m. They confirmed what Dylan had already stated. Will Bush was pronounced dead at 12:10 p.m. Dylan Thomas was arrested and charged with murder. He had no prior criminal history, but in the months leading up to the murder, he had displayed increasingly bizarre behavior. On November 6, 2023, just weeks before the killing, Dylan had attempted to climb a 45-foot fence at Buckingham Palace. Armed police had to tackle him to the ground when he failed to respond to commands. When questioned, Dylan explained that he was trying to explore the energy pattern between Buckingham Palace and Cleopatra's Needle, an ancient Egyptian obelisk located on the Thames embankment. It was a statement that suggested profound detachment from reality. While awaiting trial, Dylan was placed in Ashworth High Secure Hospital in Liverpool, a facility specializing in the treatment of individuals with severe mental illnesses who have committed serious offenses. Psychiatric evaluations diagnosed him with schizophrenia and psychosis. Experts testified that at the time of the murder, Dylan had been experiencing a psychotic episode. He had been hearing voices, experiencing delusions, and had lost the ability to distinguish between reality and his disturbed thoughts. The legal question became whether Dylan could be held fully responsible for his actions given his mental state. Under English law, a defendant can be found not guilty by reason of insanity if they were unable to understand the nature of their actions or distinguish right from wrong at the time of the offense. However, the prosecution argued that Dillon had demonstrated enough awareness to plan the attack. He had brought weapons. He had concealed his intentions from his grandmother. He had called emergency services afterward. The jury deliberated and returned a guilty verdict. Dillon Thomas was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 19 years before the possibility of parole. The case highlighted the intersection of mental illness and violent crime, raising difficult questions about how society identifies and treats individuals in psychiatric crisis. Will Bush's family spoke publicly about their loss. His sister, Catherine, described Dillon as an evil, manipulative liar. She said Will had been a great person, generous and kind, and that his memory should not be defined by the barbaric attack that ended his life. Interestingly, Dillon Thomas was the grandson of Sir Stanley Thomas, the founder of Peter's Pies, now known as Peter's Food Service Group, a company worth over $200 million. Sir Stanley attended the trial, a painful reminder that wealth and privilege offer no immunity from the devastation of mental illness. The case also raised broader questions about how individuals exhibiting signs of severe psychiatric disturbance are managed before they commit acts of violence. Dillon had displayed warning signs for months, yet no intervention had occurred that might have prevented the tragedy. On the campus of the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, thousands of students walked the tree-lined paths each day, attending classes, conducting research, building their futures. Among them, in the spring of 2017, was a 26-year-old visiting scholar from China named Yingying Zhang. She had arrived in Illinois just weeks earlier, in April, to conduct research in environmental engineering. Her focus was on photosynthesis and crop productivity in soybeans and corn, work that could have implications for global food security. Yingying had already earned her master's degree from Peking University, one of China's most prestigious institutions. She was engaged to a classmate from Peking University, and they planned to marry in October. After completing her doctorate, she hoped to return to China and take a position as a university professor. She loved playing guitar, singing, and dreamed of making meaningful contributions to her field. On June 9, 2017, Yingying was running late for an appointment. She needed to sign a lease with a landlord for an apartment she planned to rent. She had taken a bus toward the meeting location, but when she got off near the B4 parking garage on North Goodwin Avenue, she realized she was still several blocks away. It was just after 2 p.m. Surveillance cameras captured what happened next. A black 4-door Saturn Astra hatchback pulled up beside Yingying. The driver leaned over and spoke to her through the open passenger window. They had a brief conversation. Then Yingying opened the door and got into the car. The vehicle drove away. Yingying Zhang was never seen alive again. When she failed to arrive at the apartment showing, the landlord called her phone. There was no answer. Her fiancé, who was still in China, grew concerned when she did not respond to his messages. By the next morning, friends reported her missing to the University of Illinois Police Department. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from campus and identified the black Saturn Astra. The car was distinctive. Saturn had stopped manufacturing vehicles in 2010, and the Astra model was relatively rare in the United States. Investigators ran a search of registered Saturn Astras in the area and quickly identified a match. The car belonged to Brent Christensen, a 27-year-old physics graduate student at the university. Christensen lived in an apartment near campus with his girlfriend. On the same day Yingying disappeared, another young woman reported to police that a black Saturn Astra had pulled up beside her on campus. The driver had offered her a ride, but something about the situation felt wrong. She declined and walked away. The woman provided a description of the driver that matched Christensen. Detectives brought Christensen in for questioning. He admitted to driving his car near campus on June 9th, but claimed he had not picked up anyone. He said he might have stopped to ask someone for directions, but he insisted he had not given anyone a ride. His story contradicted the surveillance footage, which clearly showed Yingying getting into his car. Investigators wanted to search Christensen's vehicle immediately, but at that point, they did not have sufficient probable cause to obtain a warrant. They needed more evidence. For 19 days, the case remained in limbo. Yingying's family flew to Illinois from China, desperate for answers. Her fiancé, her parents, and her brother held press conferences, pleading for information. The university community rallied, organizing search parties and distributing flyers. But as the days passed, hope faded. On June 28th, 19 days after Yingying's disappearance, investigators finally obtained a search warrant for Christensen's car. Forensic technicians examined the vehicle with meticulous care. They noticed that the front passenger door had been cleaned far more thoroughly than the rest of the car. The interior surfaces had been scrubbed, likely with a chemical cleaner. It was an obvious attempt to destroy evidence. Despite the cleaning, forensic tests revealed trace amounts of blood on the door panel. The blood was tested and matched Yingying's DNA. Detectives also obtained a warrant to search Christensen's phone and computer. What they found was chilling. Christensen had visited an online forum called Abduction 101, a site dedicated to fantasies about kidnapping. He had browsed sub-forums with titles like Perfect Abduction Fantasy and Planning a Kidnapping. The search history revealed that Christensen had been researching methods of abduction for months before Yingying's disappearance. He had viewed videos and read discussions about how to select victims, how to avoid detection, and how to dispose of bodies. The evidence was damning, but investigators still lacked Yingying's body. Without a body, securing a conviction could be more difficult. Prosecutors needed more. On June 29, 2017, a vigil was held on campus for Yingying. Hundreds of students, faculty, and community members gathered, lighting candles and sharing memories of the young scholar they had lost. Brent Christensen attended the vigil. So did his girlfriend. What Christensen did not know was that police had already spoken to his girlfriend and convinced her to cooperate. She agreed to wear a concealed recording device. At the vigil, Christensen was recorded making disturbing comments. He spoke about what kind of person makes an ideal victim. He discussed how someone could abduct a person without being caught. His girlfriend, shaken but determined, continued to record. In a later conversation, captured on the same recording device, Christensen admitted to the crime. He said he had kidnapped Yingying and taken her to his apartment. He described how she had fought and resisted. He admitted to sexually assaulting her. He said he had hit her in the head with a baseball bat, stabbed her in the neck, and decapitated her. He also made a chilling claim. He said he was a serial killer and that Yingying was his 13th victim. He told his girlfriend that Yingying's body would never be found. Armed with the recording, detectives obtained a warrant to search Christensen's apartment. A cadaver dog was brought in and detected the scent of human remains in the bathroom. Forensic teams moved in with luminol and other chemical agents. Despite Christensen's efforts to clean the bathroom with bleach and drain cleaner, investigators found blood. It was located on the underside of the carpet, behind the baseboard of the bedroom wall, and on the mattress. The blood matched Yingying's DNA. They also found a baseball bat with traces of her blood. On June 30th, 2017, Brent Christensen was arrested and charged with kidnapping resulting in death, a federal offense that carried the possibility of the death penalty. The case went to trial, and the evidence presented was overwhelming. The surveillance footage, the forensic evidence, the recorded confession, and the physical traces of Yingying's blood in his apartment all pointed to one conclusion. Christensen had abducted, tortured, and murdered Yingying Zhang. The jury found him guilty. During the sentencing phase, prosecutors sought the death penalty. They argued that Christensen's crime was premeditated, brutal, and showed no remorse. But the jury could not reach a unanimous decision on the death penalty. Under federal law, a unanimous verdict is required for a death sentence. Christensen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Yingying's body was never recovered. Christensen refused to reveal where he had disposed of her remains, denying her family the closure of a proper burial. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence that Christensen had fantasized about becoming a serial killer. He had studied the methods of infamous killers and had expressed a desire to achieve notoriety. However, investigators found no credible evidence that he had murdered anyone other than Yingying. His claim of 13 victims appeared to be a boast, an attempt to inflate his own sense of importance. The case had a profound impact on the University of Illinois campus. Students, Particularly international students expressed concerns about safety. The university implemented new measures, including expanded transportation services and increased lighting in isolated areas. A memorial was placed at the bus stop where Ying Ying was last seen, outside the Illinois Public Media Building. People continue to leave flowers there, a quiet tribute to a young woman whose life was stolen, just as her future was beginning. These 4 cases, separated by geography and circumstance, share common threads. Each victim was known for their kindness, their contributions to their communities and their connections to others. Barney Sims mentored young people and fought for victims' rights. Caitlin Montgomery was a devoted mother. Will Bush was a loyal friend. Ying Zhang was a dedicated scholar with dreams of making the world better. Each was killed by someone who exploited their trust or their vulnerability. In Barney's case, he opened his time to a troubled teenager seeking guidance. In Caitlin's case, she was targeted by a former partner who refused to accept the end of their relationship. In Will's case, he maintained a friendship with someone whose mental illness had spiraled into violence. In Ying Ying's case, she accepted a ride from a stranger, a decision made in the ordinary course of a busy day. The investigations that followed each murder demonstrated the power of modern forensic science and the persistence of dedicated law enforcement professionals. In Atlanta, detectives used surveillance footage, phone records, and social media analysis to identify and apprehend Eric Banks within days. In Virginia, phone records and DNA evidence exposed Trenton Fry's lies and secured his conviction. In Chester, England, the immediate confession and overwhelming physical evidence left no doubt about Dylan Thomas's guilt. In Illinois, forensic analysis of digital evidence, combined with a covert recording, unraveled Brent Christensen's carefully constructed facade. Yet these cases also reveal the limitations of the justice system. In Barney's case, his killer received 30 years instead of life, a sentence some felt was insufficient given the calculated nature of the crime. In Caitlin's case, no sentence could undo the trauma inflicted on her young daughter. In Will's case, the question lingered. Could Dylan's descent into psychosis have been intercepted before it turned deadly? In Ying Ying's case, the refusal to reveal the location of her remains left her family without closure, unable to bring her home for burial. The legacy of these cases extends beyond the courtroom. Barney's work with Atlanta Victims Assistance continues, honoring his commitment to supporting those affected by crime. Caitlin's family has become advocates for domestic violence prevention, urging others to recognize the warning signs of abusive relationships. Will's loved ones have spoken publicly about the need for better mental health resources and intervention for individuals showing signs of severe psychiatric disturbance. Ying Ying's family established a scholarship in her name, supporting young scholars pursuing research in environmental science, ensuring that her dreams of contributing to the world live on through others. These stories are not just about the individuals who died. They are about the communities left behind, the families who must rebuild their lives, and the systems that must evolve to prevent future tragedies. They are about the painstaking work of investigators who sift through evidence, reconstruct timelines, and build cases that hold perpetrators accountable. They are about the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of violence. In true crime, the search for answers is never truly complete. Even when a case is solved, when a verdict is delivered and a sentence imposed, questions remain. What drives a person to take another's life? How do we recognize the warning signs before tragedy strikes? How do we support the survivors left in the wake of violence? These are the questions that linger, long after the courtroom doors close and the headlines fade. And these are the questions that remind us why these stories matter, why we listen, and why we must never forget the victims whose lives were stolen too soon.